It was still dark enough that the lake looked like a single sheet of hammered metal when my headlights swept over it. Cold morning fog drifted low across the ramp, a blue-gray ghost moving just slow enough to make you wonder if it had a mind of its own. I wasn't planning to film anything that day. Just drop the boat in, grab the quiet, and let the water decide how long I stayed. But then the beam of my headlights landed on something that shouldn't have been there. Concrete. A lot of it. At first, I thought someone had dumped construction debris. This is Alaska. People do strange things in the middle of the night. But as I stepped out of the truck, boots crunching on the icy gravel, I realized what I was looking at: 18 concrete blocks arranged in a crooked line across my lake ramp like some kind of barricade built by people who didn't understand subtlety or boundaries. Each block was the size of a small cooler, ugly and intentional. And each had the same spray-painted mark, the HOA's logo. That's when it hit me. This wasn't trash. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't nature being annoying. This was a message, the kind that says, "We don't think you belong here." I actually laughed, the kind of laugh that only comes from shock mixed with a strange thrill of challenge. Because if there's one thing HOAs never seem to learn, it's this. The more complicated they try to make something, the simpler my response becomes. And that morning, staring at those heavy, stubborn blocks, one thought settled in my mind like the lake mist settling on my jacket. I'm getting my ramp back, and I'm doing it the legal way they'll hate the most. I walked the line of blocks slowly, counting each one again as if the number might magically change. 18, not 17, not 19. 18 perfect little statements of control. I pushed on one with my boot. Solid, fresh, and judging by the wet imprints in the frost, they had been placed only hours before. Typical. HOAs love stealth more than ninjas and raccoons combined. They wait until residents are asleep, then do their community improvements, which usually means making everyone's life harder in the name of aesthetics. But this wasn't aesthetics. My ramp wasn't visible from the road, wasn't part of the HOA's greenbelt, and, most importantly, wasn't their land. It was mine. My deed said so. My mortgage company said so. Even the county map from 1974 said so. Still, I knew their angle. They'd been irritated for months ever since they discovered I used the ramp to launch my small aluminum boat. Some folks in the neighborhood liked the idea of a lake community. They just didn't like anyone actually using the lake. They thought the ramp was unsightly, unregulated, or my personal favorite, a potential environmental hazard. Environmental hazard. For a ramp that had existed before half their houses were even built. But concrete blocks? That was bold, even for them. And boldness told me something important. They didn't think I'd fight back. They thought I'd accept it the way most people accept HOA nonsense, with quiet resentment, passive compliance, and a side that says, "Fine, whatever, it's not worth the hassle." But they didn't know me. Hassle is my middle name. The fog thickened as I took photos from all angles. Evidence. Precise documentation. Measurements with the tape I kept in the truck. HOA battles weren't won with anger. They were won with paperwork. And I knew exactly which piece of paperwork I needed. The Superior Ramp Permit. It was one of those obscure state-level authorizations that nobody talks about because almost nobody needs it. But it existed for a reason. When a private landowner had a launch point that predated any residential development, and the HOA tried to interfere, you could escalate the matter above their jurisdiction. Straight to the state. Straight to the top. And HOAs absolutely hated when you did that. I got back into the truck, turned the heat on high, and pulled out my phone. I already knew the permit office didn't open for another 2 hours, but that didn't matter. My plan was already forming, sharp and gleaming like morning ice. Step 1, document everything. Step 2, submit the Superior Permit request with a full record of harassment. Step 3, wait for the state to laugh, because they would, and then issue ruling the HOA couldn't touch. Step 4, move the blocks. By crane, in broad daylight, with witnesses. Oh, I planned to make a video of that. But first, I needed to know exactly how far they were willing to push this. So I drove straight to the HOA office. The sun was just beginning to rise when I pulled up. Their sign, white and overly fancy, was dusted with frost. I walked inside, and there, behind the counter, sat Marlene. The self-appointed queen of the HOA board. The woman who once issued a warning because my mailbox was too rustic. She looked up, smiled that thin, I tolerate you smile, and said, "Good morning. How can I help you?" I dropped the stack of photos on the counter. "You can start," I said, "by explaining why your logo is on 18 concrete blocks sitting on my property." Her smile didn't change, but her eyes did. And in that tiny flicker, that brief crack in her HOA armor, I knew something. Something important. This story was only just beginning. Marlene's eyes darted from the photos to my face and back again, like she was searching for the version of this reality where she could pretend she hadn't seen them. But even she couldn't perform that level of HOA magic. "Concrete blocks," she finally said, voice airy and innocent, like she was describing a decorative planter instead of barricade. "Are you sure they're from us?" I leaned one elbow on the counter. "Your logo is on them." She tapped one manicured finger on the stack of pictures. "That doesn't mean the association approved it." "So someone broke into your supply closet," I said, "and stole 18 concrete blocks." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't like humor when she wasn't the one delivering it. "We didn't place anything on your ramp," she said, waving her hand as if the word ramp personally offended her. "Then who did?" She hesitated, one beat too long. "I'm not sure, but if it concerns you, you're welcome to file a complaint at our next meeting." There it was, the standard HOA tactic. Push every problem to the next meeting, then the next, until the person complaining either gives up or moves out. But I wasn't here for meetings. I was here for answers and momentum. I gathered my photos and headed back toward the door. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To get a permit," I said. "One you can't veto." Her face froze. The superior permit was HOA kryptonite. Most people didn't know it existed, but most HOAs did, and they hated when anyone mentioned it. Outside, the sun had finally crawled over the ridge, lighting up the lake like brushed gold. But now the beauty of it only made me angrier. That water was part of why I bought the property, part of why I worked the hours I did, and part of the reason I'd chosen this house over the one in town. And these people thought they could block me out of it with a midnight concrete delivery. I drove straight to the State Permit and Land Use Center. It was a squat building with siding the color of oatmeal and a parking lot still half covered in snow. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of coffee and impatience. A man sat behind a desk reading a hunting magazine. His name tag read, Brett. "Morning," he said without looking up. "Here for fishing license." "Nope," I said, dropping the folder of photos onto the counter. "Superior Lake Ramp permit." His magazine lowered an inch. "You being serious?" "Very." He raised the magazine the rest of the way down and gave me a look that bordered between impressed and concerned. Not many folks need that one. "Oh, I need it." He flipped through the pictures, eyebrows climbing higher with each page. When he reached the shot of the row concrete blocks, he let out a low whistle. "That HOA?" he asked, like everyone in the area already knew exactly which group of property zealots we were dealing with. "That HOA?" I confirmed. He thumbed toward a door behind him. "You want room 3. Talk to Angela. She eats HOA for breakfast." Perfect. I thanked him and stepped into the hallway. Room 3's door was covered with various wildlife stickers. Moose, bears, a cartoon salmon wearing sunglasses. I knocked. "Come in," a voice called. Inside sat a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled into a braid and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked up from a stack of surveys and grinned the moment she saw my photos. "Oh, these people again." "That's what your co-worker said," I replied. She motioned for me to sit. "So you're applying for a superior permit? On private shoreline?" "Private since 1974, I said, "and recorded on my deed." She nodded crisply. "Good. HOA can't override that. They can regulate paint colors and mailbox heights, but they can't tell you where you can launch your boat, especially if the ramp predates a development." I felt a rush of satisfaction. Glad we're on the same page. "More than the same page," she said. "We're in the same chapter, same sentence. The state hates when HOAs overreach. They make our jobs messy." She began typing with the speed of someone who believed paperwork was a competitive sport. "So," she continued, "do you want the basic permit or the escalated one?" "What's the difference?" "Basic gets you protection to use the ramp. Escalated allows you to remove obstructions using state authority. Meaning, if your HOA tries to block you, you can legally remove their junk, and we'll back you up." "That one," I said immediately. "Oh, I figured." She slid a form toward me. "Fill this out. The more detail, the better." I wrote everything. Dates, times, photos, the HOA's logo on the blocks, even the fact that the frost print showed the blocks were delivered the night before. When I finished, she skimmed it. "This is solid," she said. "We'll approve it. But one thing, state procedure required we attempt to notify the HOA before we send you the final copy." "I want to be there," I said. Her eyebrows rose. "For the notice?" "Oh, yes. I want them to hear it." She chuckled. "You sound like my kind of people." An hour later, the paperwork was processed, the permit approved pending notice, and Angela asked, "Ready to pay them a visit?" I nodded. "Let's go ruin someone's afternoon." We drove in separate vehicles, but she insisted on following me back to the HOA office to make things official. I didn't mind. Having a state official behind me felt like rolling into a chess match with a war tank. When we walked inside, Marlene was still there, still pretending she ran a miniature kingdom. Her smile, which had been thin before, now nearly evaporated. "Can I help you?" she asked Angela, her tone tight enough to bounce a coin off. "Yes," Angela said pleasantly. "We're serving notice that Mr. Reynolds' superior ramp permit has been approved by the state. Any obstruction placed on his private ramp must be removed within 72 hours, or the state will authorize him to remove it himself." Marlene blinked, then blinked again. That can't be right," she stammered. "We didn't approve." Angela cut her off gently but firmly. "You don't have to approve it. The state did." I watched the color drain from her face like someone had opened a valve. "And just so you're aware," Angela continued, "if it's determined that the HOA placed those blocks, fines can apply." Now she looked like she might faint, and I enjoyed every second of it. Angela handed me the preliminary permit copy. "You'll get the final document this afternoon. After that, you're cleared to remove the blocks any way you see fit, as long as it's safe." "Safe is a plan," I said. "But it's also going to be very, very public." Angela grinned. "I'll be watching your video." When she left, Marlene tried to regain her composure. "This isn't over," she said. "No," I replied, stepping toward the door. "This is only Section 2. By the time I got home, the sky had shifted from crisp morning blue to that milky gray that promised snow. Alaska has a way of making every day feel like a weather gamble, but today I didn't care. I had a mission, a permit on the way, and 18 concrete blocks waiting for their eviction notice. I parked the truck beside the ramp and got out to check the blocks again. They sat there like a row of stubborn stone soldiers, cold and heavy and absolutely in my way. But something about them felt different now. Not like obstacles, but like trophies I hadn't won yet. I filmed a quick clip for the video, panning across the blocks, giving the audience a taste of the madness. "Today," I said into the camera, "we're doing things the HOA way, which means we're doing things the state way, which means they're not going to like how this ends." I shut off the camera just as a familiar voice called out from behind me. "Looks like you're gearing up for something stupid." I turned around. It was my neighbor, Tom, gray beard, flannel shirt, waders still wet from his own early morning fishing trip. He walked over with that slow, amused gait of someone who had seen enough HOA drama to have an honorary degree in it. "You saw the blocks?" I asked. "Everyone saw the blocks," he said. "HOA folks were bragging last night at the clubhouse. Something about enforcing access guidelines. Translation: we were bored and wanted to annoy someone." "Figures. Guess what?" I said. "The state approved the superior permit." Tom grinned like a man who just heard the best gossip of the year. "Oh, they're gonna hate that." "Oh, I fully intend for them to." He crossed his arms. "You need help moving these things." "That depends," I said. "How do you feel about cranes?" His eyebrows went up. You're getting a crane. I nodded. Full size. On video. He laughed so hard he had to brace himself against one of the blocks. Okay, now I have to help. While we talked logistics, my phone buzzed. A message from Angela at the permit office. Final permit ready. Scan copy attached. Hard copy in mail. Remove blocks anytime after 3 p.m. It was 2:47 p.m. Perfect. I showed the message to Tom. Well, he said, shrugging, guess we better start making phone calls. By 3:15, the crane truck rolled up the road with a low, rumbling growl, the kind of noise that echoed off the trees and announced itself louder than a marching band. The operator, a thick-shouldered guy named Carl, climbed down from the cab. You Reynolds? He asked. That's me. Got your message. You weren't kidding. 18 concrete blocks. You neither moved or relocated. Oh, I said, we're relocating them. Far away from here. Tom clapped me on the back. You mean the HOA flower bed? I grinned. Just wait. A couple more neighbors drifted over, drawn by the crane like moss to chaos. Even old Mrs. Lindwall came out with her dog, claiming she was just passing by, even though her house was 3 blocks away. People love a spectacle, and nothing attracts a crowd like someone legally doing something the HOA hates. Carl unfolded the crane, its joint sighing like a metal beast waking from hibernation. The long boom extended, casting a thin shadow over the lake. I held up the permit. Everyone see this? This is state authority, meaning everything we're doing today is 100% legal, documented, and very, very official. Tom whispered to me, you know they're watching from the clubhouse windows, right? I didn't even have to look to know he was right. We started moving the blocks. Carl hooked the first one, lifted it with mechanical ease, and swung it away from the ramp. The crowd cheered like we were dismantling a monument to bad decisions. I filmed every second. As the 4th block was being lifted, a golf cart screeched around the corner like it was fleeing police chase. At the wheel was HOA Vice President Douglas, a man who always looked like he was auditioning for a toothpaste commercial and was personally offended by the existence of tire tracks on gravel. He jumped out before the golf cart even stopped rolling. You can't do this, he shouted. Tom muttered, here we go. I walked toward Douglas slowly, holding up the printed permit like it was a holy artifact. We absolutely can. This is HOA property, he yelled. No, I said calmly, this is my property. And these, I tapped one of the blocks with my boot, are obstructions placed without permission. The state-approved removal. That's impossible. We weren't notified. I was there when you were notified. I said, you were busy pretending you'd never seen concrete before. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping on a dock. That permit isn't valid, he snapped. I raised an eyebrow. Would you like to explain that to Angela at the state office? Because she's expecting your call. His face paled. He knew exactly who I meant. For a moment, he stood frozen, torn between retreat and bravado. Finally, he pointed a trembling finger at me. This is not the end of this. No, I agreed, stepping closer. This is the end of the concrete. The crowd chuckled. Douglas retreated to his golf cart and sped off, fishtailing in a burst of petty rage. Block after block was lifted, swung, and set onto the dump trailer I'd rented. The process felt cathartic. Like every clunk of concrete hitting steel, was another reminder that HOAs didn't get the final say. And then, halfway through, Carl looked over and asked, what do you want to do with them? That was the moment I'd been waiting for. I gestured toward the community green space, specifically a large, empty stretch of land behind the clubhouse where the HOA planned to put a decorative boulder garden in the spring. Well, I said, seems like they're big fans of concrete, so I thought we'd deliver their missing landscaping material back to them. Tom laughed so hard he nearly dropped his phone. Carl shrugged. You're the paying customer. The crane swung. The crowd followed, and together we watched as 18 unauthorized HOA blocks were neatly deposited into the one place they absolutely couldn't ignore, right in front of the clubhouse patio. Neighbors applauded. Someone took photos. Someone else filmed. Even Mrs. Lindwall's dog barked approvingly. I ended the video recording with one final statement. If the HOA wants their blocks back on my property, they're gonna need a superior permit of their own. When the crane left and the crowd dispersed, I stood by the ramp, now completely clear. The lake shimmered under the pale sky, peaceful and quiet again. But I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. HOAs don't lose gracefully. They regroup, re-strategize, and retaliate with paperwork and pettiness. And I could already feel a storm brewing. By sunrise the next morning, I knew something was wrong. You can tell when an HOA is plotting. The air gets stiff with paperwork energy, like the scent of fresh-printed violation notices drifting across the neighborhood. And sure enough, when I stepped outside with my coffee, there they were, 4 new envelopes taped to my mailbox like warning flags. HOA violations, stacked like pancakes, delivered before 7 a.m. That alone should have been a federal crime. I peeled off the first envelope and opened it. Violation number 1, an authorized placement of heavy materials on community property. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Community property? They were the ones who placed the blocks. I had simply returned them to sender. I opened the second. Violation number 2, obstruction of clubhouse landscaping development. The clubhouse landscaping wasn't scheduled to happen for another 5 months. If anything, I'd improved the area. It looked more interesting with the blocks. The third envelope was my favorite. Violation number 3, public disturbance caused by industrial machinery without HOA approval. I held the letter up to the light and read it twice. A crane is not industrial machinery, I muttered. It's a tool, a very, very large, beautiful tool. The fourth envelope was the longest. Violation number 4, conduct unbecoming community member. I didn't even know that was a category. It sounded like something Marlene typed while hyperventilating. At the bottom was a written note. HOA board meeting, mandatory attendance, tonight at 6 p.m. I smirked. So that was their plan. Drag me into the meeting, try to shame me, drown me in pseudo-legal jargon, and hope I back down. Classic HOA tactic. Pile on enough nonsense to make a sane person choose peace over principle. Unfortunately for them, I value principle, and I am not a sane person when you mess with my property. I folded the notices, stuck them in my jacket pocket, and headed for the lake. The ramp looked perfect. Smooth, clear, beautiful. A clean line leading right into the calm water. For the first time in days, I felt that old familiar peace settle in. I stepped onto the ramp slowly, sipping my coffee as the lake reflected the gray morning sky. The silence was good, needed, but peace has a short lifespan in neighborhoods with HOAs. Around noon, Tom appeared at the edge of the yard, carrying a small radio and wearing the grin of someone who just overheard something juicy. "You're gonna want to hear this," he said. "What's up?" "The HOA is having an emergency prep meeting before the board meeting tonight." I got my little radio tuned to the clubhouse feed. "What feed?" He tapped the radio. "A little device my nephew set up for fishing tournaments years back. It can pick up signals from inside the clubhouse when they use their wireless MIC system. Most of the time it's boring. Today? Not boring." I raised an eyebrow. "Legal?" "Probably not," he said. "But it's not illegal not to turn off a radio someone else left in your garage." I sighed. "Hit play." He flipped it on. What followed was pure entertainment. Marlene's voice boomed through the speaker. "And if we allow this kind of behavior, it'll set a precedent. People will start thinking they can use their property however they want. That's chaos." Someone else said, "Isn't that how property works?" "No," she snapped. "Not in an HOA community." Another board member chimed in. "We need a strategy. A strong one." He embarrassed us. "It wasn't embarrassing," Douglas muttered defensively. "We were caught off guard." "You ran away, Douglas." "I did not run away." "You left a skid mark in the gravel." "That was intentional." The room erupted into overlapping complaints, accusations, and long, theatrical sighs. It was delicious. Then came the part that actually mattered. Marlene lowered her voice. "We need to find a way to challenge his permit. If we can't do that, we need to find a violation he cannot fight." Tom paused the radio. That's the part one didn't like. I nodded. That's the part that means they are desperate. Desperate HOAs are dangerous. They stop pretending to follow their own rules. They start weaponizing ambiguity. Tonight's meeting wasn't going to be a discussion. It was going to be an ambush, and I needed to be ready. At 5:30, I grabbed my folder containing the superior permit, the state letter, my property deed, emails, time-stamped photos, and a printed copy of Alaska's land use regulations. If they wanted a legal fight, I was bringing an arsenal. I walked to the clubhouse. The path felt strangely quiet. As I approached, I could see silhouettes through the frosted glass windows. The room was packed. When I opened the door, the noise hushed instantly. Every head turned. It felt like walking into a courtroom where everyone had already decided the verdict. Marlene sat at the center table, surrounded by board members like a queen at a tribunal. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, voice firm, "thank you for attending. Please take a seat." I sat in the single chair placed directly in front of the board, like a defendant on trial. She folded her hands. "We are here to address several violations related to your actions yesterday." "With all due respect," I said, "I have a state-issued superior permit stating my actions were legal." "We'll determine that," she said. "No," I replied calmly, placing the permit on the table. "You won't. The state already did." A few neighbors in the audience murmured. Marlene cleared her throat. "You escalated an issue without giving this board a chance to resolve it. You mean the issue you pretended you didn't know about?" I asked. Gasps. Douglas's face reddened. "That is not accurate," he snapped. I pulled out the photo from the permit office, showing him present during the notification. "Really? Because this photo says otherwise." More murmurs. Marlene pressed on. "Regardless, the use of heavy machinery. The crane was authorized, and the placement of concrete blocks. Return property," I corrected. "Placed on HOA land, not mine." She gripped her pen like she wanted to snap it. "Mr. Reynolds, your behavior undermines the harmony of this community." I leaned back slightly. Maybe the community shouldn't try to secretly block access to private property in the middle of the night. That hit harder than I expected, because a woman in the back stood up and said, "Wait, middle of the night." Another neighbor rose. "They did that at midnight, with no notice." People began whispering, then questioning, then realizing they didn't like it either. The board's faces tightened. Their control of the room was slipping. So Marlene played her final card. "We are issuing a $4,000 cumulative fine," she declared loudly, "for disruptive conduct, misuse of equipment, and unauthorized activity." The room gasped. I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached calmly into my folder and pulled out the state letter. "This," I said, placing it on the table, "is the part where you realize you just made a very big mistake." The letter was explicit. Any retaliatory action against the permit holder is unlawful and subject to state penalties. The board members stared at it like it was a bomb ticking down. Then the door opened, and in walked Angela with a clipboard and an expression that said, "I warned you." The room went silent. "This meeting," she said, "is now a state matter." The moment Angela stepped through the clubhouse door, you could feel the panic spread through the room like a cold gust of wind. Even the fluorescent lights hummed a little louder, as if they, too, sensed the coming chaos. She shut the door behind her with slow, deliberate calm, the kind that made you wonder if the building itself suddenly had laws to obey. "Good evening," she said, her voice carrying an authority that didn't need volume. "I understand this meeting concerns actions taken against a state permit holder." Marlene rose halfway from her chair. "This is a private HOA meeting." Angela held up a hand. "Not anymore." The room collectively inhaled. "I'm here in an official capacity," she continued, "due to reports of retaliation, unauthorized obstruction of private property, and misuse of HOA authority." Douglas slumped a little in his seat. One of the board members quietly closed his laptop, as if hiding it might erase his digital sins. Angela walked to the table, heels clicking like a countdown. She picked up the stack of violation notices they'd issued me that morning, flipped through them, and set them back down. 4 violations in one morning, she said. That's ambitious. It was necessary, Marlene said tightly. We were restoring order. Angela tilted her head. Is that what you were doing at midnight when you placed concrete blocks on private property? Several neighbors gasped. There it was. Out loud. Marlene's face flushed red. We did no such thing. Then who did? Angela asked. Silence. Dangerous silence. Marlene's eyes darted to Douglas. Douglas immediately looked at the ceiling like there was an emergency evacuation plan written up there. Angela pulled out a state-issued folder. Funny thing, the state received an anonymous tip yesterday morning. A resident claimed to have video footage of HOA members placing blocks at night. The room stirred like a pot being brought to boil. My heart kicked. Anonymous tip? Video footage? This was news even to me. Angela continued. We requested the footage. It was delivered this morning, and I watched it on my way here. She snapped the folder shut. Every individual is clearly identifiable. The entire board stiffened. Marlene's jaw actually dropped, then snapped back up like she was physically trying to trap her own panic inside. A woman in the back of the room shouted, You did this? You blocked his property. A man next to her added, You lied to us. We paid dues for this. The crowd was turning, fast, and with the energy of a pack of wolves realizing the shepherds were actually coyotes. Angela placed her clipboard on the table. Under state law, an authorized obstruction of access to a waterway on private property is a civil offense. Coordinated action to do so, especially under the guise of HOA authority, qualifies as misuse of governance. What does that mean exactly? Asked a neighbor near the front. It means, Angela said, the board is under investigation. The room erupted into overlapping voices, shocked, angry, bewildered. Some demanded answers. Others demanded resignations. A few demanded refunds. Meanwhile, Marlene sat frozen, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles went white. She looked at Douglas. Douglas looked back. It was the look of two people silently agreeing to betray each other the first chance they got. Angela tapped the table until the room quieted. We will proceed calmly, she said. First, we need to determine if the board acted independently or if the HOA membership approved these actions. Marlene seized on that. Yes. This was a group decision. A collective chorus of "No, IT wasn't" filled the room. One neighbor stood, arms crossed. You told us it was routine maintenance. Another shouted, You never mentioned blocking someone's ramp. Someone else yelled, We didn't vote on anything. Marlene's mouth opened and closed. Her facade was crumbling. Angela nodded. That answers that. She then turned to me. Mr. Reynolds, thank you for your cooperation. Do you have anything you'd like to add? I stepped forward. Just one thing. The room fell silent again. I didn't want to fight. I wanted to use my ramp. That's it. I followed the rules. They didn't. And instead of talking to me, one conversation, they tried to bully me into compliance. Murmurs of agreement filled the room. So, I continued, I'm asking the board for one thing tonight. Do not make the rest of this neighborhood suffer because you couldn't handle being wrong. For a moment, even Marlene looked like she felt the weight of that. But then her expression hardened. This is all ridiculous, she snapped. That ramp is unsightly, unregulated, and unsafe. It doesn't belong in a community like ours. There it was. The truth. The real reason. Not rules. Not safety. Just a personal opinion masquerading as authority. Angela pinned her with a stare sharp enough to cut glass. Personal preference is not legal justification, and your actions will reflect that. Then her voice softened slightly. But there's an important detail you should all know. The room leaned in. The anonymous tip, the video, it wasn't from a frustrated neighbor. She paused, letting the tension build like a drum roll. It came from someone on the board. A collective gasp exploded through the room. My pulse jumped. A board member? A whistleblower? Angela looked around. Would the individual like to identify themselves now, or shall I list the name? A chair squeaked near the far wall. Everyone turned. And slowly, nervously, board member Teresa stood up. Her face was pale but determined, as if she'd finally decided to stop swimming with sharks. "I'm sorry," she said. I couldn't let this keep happening. They didn't ask me. They didn't vote. They just did it. And they told me to lie if anyone asked." She gestured toward Marlene and Douglas. They'd been abusing their position for years. This was a final straw. The room was a powder keg, and Teresa had just lit the fuse. Douglas jumped up, pointing at her. "You traitor!" "Enough," Angela snapped. She stepped between them like a referee stepping into a serious fight. "At this time," she said, "the state is suspending the authority of the HOA board pending full investigation. All fines issued in the last 24 hours are void. All enforcement actions are paused until further notice." Marlene sputtered. You can't do that." "Yes," Angela said. "I can." People started clapping. A few whistled. One older man actually yelled, "Finally!" But the best part? The board looked genuinely stunned, as if they'd never imagined a world where they weren't in control. Angela turned to me. "Mr. Reynolds, the state thanks you for your patience. We'll be in touch." "Thank you," I said. She nodded, gathered her papers, and walked out. The board sat silent, defeated. But something told me this wasn't the end, because people who crave control don't surrender quietly. And tonight, as I walked home under the dim glow of streetlights, another feeling settled in my chest. Someone else besides Teresa had been out there that night, watching, recording. Someone I hadn't met. Yet, when I got home after the meeting, my porch light flickered twice. It did that sometimes on cold nights, but tonight it felt almost intentional, like a signal. Maybe I was still wound up from the chaos, but I couldn't shake the sense that someone was lurking just beyond the shadows. The lake was calm. The ramp looked peaceful. My world should have snapped back into quiet normalcy. Instead, it felt like something was still moving beneath the surface of this whole mess. Something unfinished. My phone buzzed. "Unknown number. Meet me at the ramp now. I have something you need to see." For a moment, I considered ignoring it. My brain had exhausted its daily capacity for HOA nonsense. But curiosity has always been my fatal flaw. I grabbed a flashlight and walked down to the ramp. The moon hovered low over the water, turning the lake into a sheet of shifting silver. A figure stood at the far end of the ramp, bundled in a thick parka, hood up. The posture was cautious, not threatening, but unsure. "Reynolds?" The voice called softly. "Depends," I said. "If you're here to issue another violation notice, you're gonna have to swim home." They let out a nervous laugh. "No, nothing like that." The person lowered their hood. It was a teenager, maybe 17. I recognize him now, Evan, from 2 houses down. The quiet kid who always seemed to disappear whenever HOA board members walked down the street. "What's going on?" I asked. He looked around like he expected someone to leap out from behind the spruce trees. "I'm the one who sent the video," he said. I blinked. "You?" He nodded. "Teresa sent Hayes this morning, but mine was the one that went in first." I frowned. "But why didn't you come forward?" Angela said it came from a board member. "That's because I didn't send it to the state," he said. "I sent it to Teresa. She uploaded it." That made more sense. Teresa needed hard proof before blowing the whistle. But why record it at all? I asked. He shifted uncomfortably. "My dad. Well, he's on the HOA security committee. Not officially, but he helps Douglas and Marlene with night patrols. He was there when they dropped the blocks." My stomach tightened. "So he helped them?" "Yes," Evan said quietly. "But he didn't want to. They pressured him. They said if he didn't help, they'd hit us with violations. Lots of them. We already had trouble paying fees." He kicked at a small pebble, watching it skip across the ramp. "I was hiding in the trees. I saw everything. I recorded it because, well, it wasn't right. And they were laughing, like messing with your ramp was some kind of game. That part didn't surprise me. What about your dad?" I asked. "Does he know you filmed it?" "No. And please, don't tell him." He swallowed. He's scared of them. I know that sounds weird, but it's true. Actually, it didn't sound weird at all. HOAs thrived on fear. Fear of fines, fear of judgment, fear of losing control. Some people lived under that pressure so long, they forgot they ever had freedom. Why come to me? I asked. He pulled a small USB drive from his pocket. Because there's more. Stuff Teresa didn't have. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of stuff? He hesitated, then pressed the drive into my hand. His fingers were shaking. I copied security footage from the clubhouse. They'd been spying on people. Not cameras inside the clubhouse. Those are loud. I'm talking about outside. Hidden ones. Pointed at driveways. At yards. At your ramp. My blood went cold. That's illegal. He nodded. I know. That's why I brought it. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. I had expected more drama. Maybe some petty retaliation, another fake violation, some board member throwing a tantrum. But this was a whole different level. Evan, I said slowly, this footage could end the HOA. Completely. I know, he said. That's why I want you to have it. You're sure? He nodded. They won't stop unless someone stops them. I exhaled. The kid was braver than half the adults in the community. Come on, I said. Let's go watch it. He tensed. I can't stay. If my dad finds out I'm gone, he'll worry. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Reynolds, you should check the lake camera first. The what? He pointed to the far side of the ramp, to the old birch tree leaning over the water. Look up. You'll see it. Then he jogged off into the shadows. I walked toward the tree, heart pounding, and raised my flashlight. And there it was. A small, camouflage camera drilled into the side of the birch trunk. A wire snaked down the back like a vein. A hidden camera, watching my lake, watching my ramp, watching me. I stared at it for a long moment. The cold wind swept across the water, but it wasn't the wind that made the hairs rise on my neck. This wasn't about the ramp. It never was. This was about control, surveillance, power, and they had been doing it for who knows how long. My phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. Be careful. They know you know. The wind suddenly felt sharper, the lake darker, the birch taller, and the woods behind me deeper than they had a minute earlier. I pocketed the USB drive carefully. Tomorrow, I'd show Angela. Tomorrow, things would change again. Tomorrow, the HOA would face something bigger than a permit. Tonight, I just needed to get home. I walked back up the ramp, the board creaking softly under my boots. The moonlight cast long shadows across the path. I could feel eyes watching. Not Evan's, not neighbors, other eyes. I reached my porch, stepped inside, and locked the door behind me. Tomorrow would be war. A different kind of war. One with consequences deeper than concrete blocks and petty fines. But for the first time in weeks, I wasn't anxious. Because I had something they'd never expected. The truth, the evidence, the witness, and the will to finish this. I smiled slightly, flipping the USB drive over in my palm. This, I whispered, is a final nail. Outside, the wind hissed through the trees like a warning. But the ramp was mine. The lake was mine. And soon enough, my community would be free from the HOA, too. I turned off the porch light, letting the night swallow the yard in darkness. End of story.